Hey guys, Chase here with my first podcast episode, and today I'm going to be talking about why the conversation about determinism, compatibilism, and free will is an ultimately pointless and meaningless endeavor. And there are two approaches to this topic, and there is a scientific approach and there is a philosophical approach. And the scientific approach I will not be covering today because I am not a scientist. I have a philosophy channel, right? So I am going to talk about the philosophy aspect of this, but if you do want to study the scientific aspect of it, I recommend looking into quantum mechanics and how that affects the case of determinism and free will and all of that. And you can also look into research about brain scans and all that type of thing and how that plays into determinism and free will and all of that. But I want to talk about the philosophical approach today, and I want to talk about it from an epistemological standpoint. And an epistemological standpoint would be, what are the limits of our knowledge on this topic of determinism, compatibilism, and free will? And so I want to start with the Enlightenment. And with starting in the Enlightenment, I want to talk about Kant and what he realized when he was reading David Hume. So David Hume was an empiricist, and that means that he thought the best way to come to the truth of something was through experience. Now, this is in contrast to the rationalists, and the rationalist empiricist debate has gone back for thousands of years now, and both of them have their uses, and both also have their downfalls. So with David Hume being an empiricist, Kant was reading David Hume, and Kant came to the realization that in order for David Hume's empiricism to make sense, David Hume was making some assumptions. And the reason that Kant said that Hume was making an assumption is because Hume was saying that the best way we can come to the truth of something is through experiencing it. But, Kant says, in order to experience something, we first have to interpret the information that we are being given. And what are those faculties that interpret the information that we are given, right? So if we walk outside to experience nature, and if I were to walk out my front door right now, I would see my car, I would see our sidewalk, I would see a road, I would see grass, I would see trees, I would see houses. And the thing is that Kant is pointing out here is that if you were to just look at these aspects of nature through your eyes and these images, if you didn't have some faculties to interpret this information, then you would just be looking at pure data. None of it would make sense. There would be no meaning. It would just be chaos. There's nothing important there. And so Kant came up with this idea of a priori faculties about experience. We have a priori faculties that are able to interpret the world around us. And through this, Kant decided or realized that there are two different worlds. And the two different worlds, there is one world of you or me, and then there is the world out there. And so what Kant means by that is that we have the world of us, of me. My mind creates a perception of reality and then interprets that information in a specific way. And then there's the world out there, and Kant says there is no way that we can know of the world in itself. And the reason we can never know the world in itself is because our mind is creating the aspects of reality. And one example that could be used to kind of demonstrate this in a more practical sense would be to look at the difference between biological creatures. Other creatures besides humans can hear different sounds that we can't hear. We can see more colors than some other animals. Some other animals have much better senses of smell than us and can smell more smells and smell smells more strongly. Tongue twister there. So that raises the question of, if I can see more colors than a dog, am I experiencing the world in itself more than that dog is? Is my perception of reality more true than a dog? Well, is a dog's reality more true than mine because a dog can smell more scents than I can? See, this is that idea of the not being able to know the world in itself. Our mind simply creates reality. And I think that this has a lot of epistemological consequences. And the reason I think it has consequences is because if it is the case that we create reality and we cannot know the world in itself, then that means if we look at the outside world and we understand the world through, let's say, causation, through this lens that we create reality and we can't know the world in itself, means that we cannot be, at least as an honest skeptic, we cannot say that the universe is governed by causes with 100% certainty. The only thing we can say is that our mind perceives the universe as functioning through causation, cause and effect, right? If you go outside and you have a ball in your hand and you throw that ball and you intuitively, realize that, okay, my arm and holding the ball, when I move my arm in a certain way and let go of that ball, the ball flies through the air. We have the arm is the cause, and then we have the ball flying through the air is the effect. And we just assume that the world functions in that way, right? But if we grant that we can't know the world in itself, then we must also say that we are not 100% sure that the world actually functions in itself through a method of cause and effect. And if the universe does not function through cause and effect, then we have no hope of coming to the conclusion on, is determinism true? Is compatibilism true? Is free will true? Because these are all questions about causes and effects, right? Determinism says that everything was predetermined because you can trace back all of the causes back to the beginning of the universe, and if you ran all of those same causes over and over again, they would always produce the same result, and therefore everything that has happened would happen in the exact same way. Then you have the free will argument, which says, yes, we do have causes for beliefs and desires, but the free will argument is that we can freely choose to act those out or not. And so all of these are based on the conversation of cause and effect, right? Or even if you were to think of some other way of interpreting the discussion between determinism, compatibilism, and free will, you could most likely apply the logic that, we're creating reality. Our minds are creating reality. We can't know the world in itself. And so I think through this that we can never know with 100% certainty that there is determinism, compatibilism, or free will. And this raises the question of, is it still useful to talk about these concepts? And I think that yes, it is. I think it's useful to talk about these concepts in a way of pragmatism. I think that pragmatism can speak into these because we need to start asking the question of, is this practical rather than is this true? See, if we admit that we can't come to the truth of these concepts in the way that we can come to the truth of 2 + 2 = 4, then we can start asking, well, what is the most practical thing for us to believe? And so I would personally admit that I think it's most practical to believe in free will. And the reason I think it's most practical to believe in free will is because of the outcome of people believing in free will. When people believe in free will, they believe that they are responsible for their actions. When people believe they have free will, they believe that their mind can be changed about certain topics. And so those two things there have a bunch of implications, because when people believe that they are responsible for their actions, they are more likely to act morally. When people believe that their thoughts and desires and beliefs can be changed through discussion, they are more willing to change their beliefs about something and listen to arguments more fully. Whereas if you have something such as determinism, where people don't believe that they are responsible for their actions, people just go and do all kinds of crazy things. And no, I know that not everyone goes and does crazy things, and I know that people who believe they have free will still go and do crazy things. But generally speaking, people who believe in determinism do not believe they are responsible for their actions. And I recently listened to a debate where one person believed in free will and the other believed in determinism, and the person who believed in free will said, well, what's the point of us even having this debate? Because if I live in a deterministic universe and all of my thoughts are predetermined, then you're not going to change my mind anyways, because what's predetermined is going to happen anyways. So when we're having discussions, when we're talking about morals, when we're talking about moral implications, it seems to me that it is more useful to believe that you have free will than it is to believe that you live in a deterministic universe. I believe that anybody who still cares about this debate is somebody who is either stuck in Enlightenment rationalism or who is religious, and both of these things I believe it is time to move past. I hope you enjoyed today's podcast. I'm going to release shorter podcasts like this one that are maybe 10 to 20 minutes long, and I hope to also do longer podcasts that, are an hour and a half long, maybe find people to interview and things like that. But I hope you enjoyed this first podcast. If you're listening on YouTube, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Also, leave a like, leave a comment, subscribe to the YouTube channel or the podcast Skeptically Skeptical. I will see you in the next one, friends. Bye-bye.